Hello and good morning. Welcome to Reality Bites with Dr. Kelly. I'm just going to take a minute to arrange my screen here so that my notes are easy for me to see. Good morning. Um, Say hello, please. I'm so glad you found me here on my new Facebook page. This is going to help me have a greater audience and keep things better organized. So thanks for finding me here. Tell me where you're watching from. Please also feel free to give comments, make comments, give testimony to me. Today is going to be mature subject matter. It is a podcast that supports male survivors of sexual abuse. It's not meant to replace therapy. Today there will be some graphic content. It might be a little bit heavy today, so practice self-care, please. But also just know that we are just talking about things today. It's important for you to know nothing bad's happening. Yeah, we're just talking. And anyways, one thing, as I've told you before, I do specialize in male survivors of sexual abuse. And one thing I hear a lot in my practice is because I advertise that I work with male survivors of sexual abuse, and I also ask men if this is part of their history. I ask that right in my intake. And so sometimes men will say, well, I'm not really sure about that. And they are questioning sort of whether or not they were abused. So confusion is very common. This is in part a lot because there's a lot of messages in society, about things on the TV, just friends making comments. It can cause a lot of confusion. So I developed a quiz for male survivors of sexual abuse. A simple quiz, again, it does contain graphic content, but and it's not a professional quiz, like it's not like been empirically validated or anything like this by any research projects. It's just something that I developed. So the first question that I would ask would be, did someone 2 years or older than you offer to teach you how to masturbate or introduce you to other sexual acts when you were a minor? And I say someone 2 years older and when you were a minor, but based on Canadian guidelines. I know in different countries there's different rules of law, but in Canada, we say that there needs to be about 2 years age difference if the child is a minor in order to consider it abuse. Otherwise, we might just say it would be, children playing or one child reenacting. And, of course, we never charge a child if they're under 12 years old because we kind of deem that they're not old enough to consent or mature enough. They're probably just, reenacting what might have happened to them, for example. So I'm talking about this based on Canadian guidelines. I know the US and different countries would have different laws and different rules about this. The next question I would ask if someone's questioning whether or not they were abused was, did someone more than 2 years older expose themselves to you or introduce you to pornography? We would refer to this as early sexualization. Exposure is a form of abuse. So, being introduced to these subjects before you're mature enough to, understand them or make sense of them. And, pornography is never something that's a great idea. It's very misleading to a healthy relationship if you're engaging in viewing pornography. It really, there's so much research about the damage that pornography does, to be honest. It can actually make it so men have problems and unrealistic expectations for their women. I know there's both genders in pornography. But another question would be, were you ever coerced or forced to touch someone else's genitals? And this could be male or female, and it could be by someone younger or older than you. And again, I'm not referring to children playing doctor, that kind of thing. But for example, I had a research participant who told me that he was being babysat by his two older cousins, and that he had made an innocent. His two older cousins were girls. He was 7, they were 12, I think, if I remember correctly. His story's in my book. But he made an innocent comment about not knowing what girls look like, and they shamed him and forced him into sexual acts. So that's an example of being coerced or forced into touching someone else. And the next question, did someone touch your genitals for reasons other than medical purposes, right? Again, it could be male or female, someone younger or older. One of my participants in my research talked about how his dad during bath time did this. It's an act called fisting, which I don't probably don't have to describe to people. But for him, it was just normal. This was bath time. Of course, it did terrible damage to him. He went on to develop dissociative identity disorder, which is the body's response to something that's very extreme, an extreme trauma. Uh, Next question, were you ever hazed in a manner that was sexual? Um, I recognize that hazing is part of male bonding, but it does damage too. It's very shame provoking. I'm guessing that a lot of the young hockey players, for example, that engage in sexual acts during hazing, when they mature, they're probably not super proud of what they did. Or if you were, the one forced into sexual acts or just doing different things with your genitals, that could be very shame inducing. I don't know if it would ever stand up in court, but again, that's a form of abuse because it's coercion, non consensual kind of thing, or being forced. Next question, when you were a youth, did a parent, a guardian, or a peer, a person in authority ever engage in sexual acts with you or in front of you? So, this element of coercion or grooming. I had someone contacted me from the US in regards to the Boy Scouts case that went on down there. And one of the things that was described to me was that the leader had actually passed around pornography at a campfire and had got the boys to engage in masturbation. And of course, that's an adult in a position of authority. They're out in the middle of the bush, right? It can also happen in adulthood too. Men can be forced or coerced into having sexual relations with their bosses too, and they could be in the same kind of position as a woman where they don't really feel like they can say no, or they might lose their job. This happens to men as well. Next question, were you ever forced to engage in sexual acts with a sibling, for example, by a parent or guardian or an older sibling? One of the participants in my research described that he was forced into sexual acts with both his younger sister and his older sisters. He only learned that it was sexual abuse when he heard his friends talking about sexual matters. So he learned, he lost his virginity to his sisters, and this did a lot of damage to him. He felt very, he didn't even understand what was going on. He was very young. He knew it was wrong, but he didn't know the extent of how wrong it was, kind of thing, if we were to label it that way. He learned about it when his peers were talking about losing their virginity. He realized he'd already done that with his sisters. So, of course, this did a lot of damage. Another question, have you ever woke up to discover someone engaging in sexual relations with you without your consent, obviously? One of the participants in my research, I had to exclude him because he didn't meet the criteria of my research, which was that he hadn't disclosed. It wasn't that he wasn't abused, but he hadn't disclosed. He had waited a year to disclose. That was the criteria for my research. But he had broken up with his common law girlfriend, and she'd actually moved out of the house. And he woke up in the middle of the night. She'd let herself in and was, having sexual relations with him. So that's non-consensual. He was not happy about that. Another question, has anyone ever drugged you unknowingly, then engaged in sexual acts with you? And this is very common with women, and it's very common with men. A woman might report commonly to the police that somebody slipped something into her drink, and, she woke up with her pants outside the truck and she has no idea what happened. This happens to guys too. It's actually very common in, unfortunately, if men engage in these hookup sites or whatever, they might, for example, this is the next question, did you agree to one thing and then you were forced or drugged, threatened into another? Maybe whoever you, agreed to meet up with took you somewhere and engaged in sexual acts that you weren't consenting to and refused to bring you back to town or something until you participated in these other acts. That's obviously abuse. Has a female ever coerced or shamed you into engaging in sexual acts with her? Maybe threatening that if you don't, she's going to tell everybody you're gay. Parents, this is a really common thing. This happens a lot in youth. I have counseled a few boys, or at least heard of a few boys, who lose their virginity this way. The girl says, if you don't sleep with me, I'm going to tell everybody you're gay. And, young boys don't necessarily have the mental capacity or, just the ability to stand up against that. And oftentimes they will engage in sexual relations just to prevent this person spreading these rumors about them, that kind of thing. So if you answered yes to any of these above questions, in my mind, you were sexually abused. And I would love to hear from you, though. Comment, did I miss anything? Or are there any other examples that you can think of that, for example, I should have included in my little self-made quiz there, right? But please know, males have the same right to their bodies as women do. Males have the same right to bodily autonomy. Boys should be allowed to discover sex naturally, just like girls should be allowed the same thing. And they also have the right to say no to sex. Men have the right to say no to sex and not be shamed or made to feel less of a man if they say no. They shouldn't be made to feel weaker or inferior, that kind of thing. They have the same rights to bodily autonomy as women do. And I love that, I'm a woman sharing this because, if it comes from a man, it might be something that you're less likely to believe. But anyway, I want to move on, and I want to go into 10 myths that male survivors should not believe about themselves. So I know we got a very lonely audience here, but I'm thankful that you guys are going to find this and maybe watch the rerun. So 10 myths that male survivors should not believe. First one, don't believe that you're alone or that you're the only person this ever happened to. Maybe you were abused by a bio parent or a sibling, like I mentioned, or a teacher or a coach. You're not the only one this ever happened to. As I discussed in some of my other podcasts, men are not talking about sexual abuse in part because they don't hear other men talking about it. This doesn't mean it's not happening. And this is part of why I'm doing what I'm doing, to break that silence. Next myth, that it's not okay to talk about it. It is okay. And unfortunately, a lot of professionals, therapists and stuff are still missing this. Sometimes you might have to give them a little nudge that this is an area you need to go into. I've recommended to other people who contact me that they actually give a copy of my book. I'll talk about it after. It's called Men Too Unspoken Truths. Give it to your therapist. Have her read it. Go through it together. Talk about what you discover, as you read the book together. Good morning, Amy Miracle. The next myth that I don't want you to believe is that no one will believe you. Come on, we've come a long way in society. We know that male sexual abuse happens. We just need to make it safer for boys and men to talk about it. That is a common reason that males are not reporting sexual abuse, because they think that no one's going to believe them. Another myth I don't want men to believe is that you asked for it, invited it, or are responsible for it happening. I want to just tell you, please don't judge yourself. Don't treat yourself as if you knew then what you know now. Okay, so you didn't invite it, you didn't ask for it, you're not responsible for it. It's really complicated for boys and men though, because offenders will engage in this very, very elaborate process of grooming, which confuses boys because pedophiles will go way out of their way, and this is something I'm going to talk about a lot on another podcast, maybe even the next one, I'm not sure. But grooming, which basically the offender will engage in a process, make sure the victim trusts them, make sure the victim likes them. They'll do this for months, even a couple of years perhaps, so that they have the affection of the victim before they ever offend against them. It's done purposely to confuse the victim into thinking that they consented. So again, don't judge yourself and think that you knew back then what you know now. Next myth, don't believe male survivors that if you had an erection or you ejaculated, it means you enjoyed it or you consented. Research shows that men can get they get erection, genital arousal, even during extreme traumas. In fact, it's very common to get erections during extreme traumas. We know this from research. We know this from different, stories that are written by men who've gone to war and stuff like this. Or been terrified. I was going to joke and say, feel free to go ask some of these ERT guys or military personnel if this is their reality, but they probably wouldn't appreciate that, so don't. But it is common. Okay, so also another myth would be that you're mature enough to consent to sexual acts, even if you were young and you knew that it was sexual. This is why we have laws in place to protect youth, because again, we don't have that prefrontal cortex development to understand the full complexities associated to these sexual acts. Even just the simple idea of regretting who your first sexual partner was or that kind of thing. That's why we have laws in place. Also, boys, I don't want you thinking that it was your job to stop it, that you should have been able to defend yourself or fight harder. You know, there's again, it's complicated for boys in part because of the grooming process. You know, you're not physically going to fight off someone that you liked, especially not in the middle of confusion, right? I also have a lot of African viewers, and I did a little bit of research on the current state, or pardon me, 10 years ago, but I'm pretty sure it's still happening. There's a lot of male rape in Africa where males are being abducted, forced into sexual acts with other men, and they're being raped. Ladies, please do not throw your men away if this happens. It does not mean that they are women if they are physically raped. Just like a woman can be overpowered by threats and weapons and fight as hard as they could possibly fight, men can still succeed at overpowering other women and other men. So, ladies, please do not expect your man or your son to be able to defend himself. They do this to destroy the culture. Don't let them destroy their culture. Even if the man that you love has been raped, he's still a man and he needs your support. Don't throw him away. Trust me, there's not enough good men out there. Keep the one you got. Next myth, that real men never turn down sex. So that, if they did respond, it means they were a willing participant. That's not true. You're allowed to say no, and just because your body responded or someone took advantage of the fact that your body responded does not mean it's consensual. Also, that you're to blame for the continuation of the abuse. A lot of boys and men, their abuse unfortunately does continue into an adult relationship where they might deem it consensual. It continues into adulthood, and this is shocking to learn, but I've heard of it several times, many, many times. But, what begins as abuse stays as abuse. And, we all need attention. We all need affection. If that was your only source of affection, what started as abuse remains abuse. Also, that your abuse determines your sexual orientation. This is not true. Again, back to this idea that if your body responded, it means you're gay. That is not true. God designed your body to respond to touch. It did. That's the end of the story. But as you can see, it's really complicated for males. There's often a lot of mixed emotions or confusion because of the grooming process, which I will talk about in a future podcast. Yeah, so and because of the biases and stuff in society, because of the shame, associated to being overpowered, body response, that kind of stuff, there's a lot of shame perhaps still associated for men to this idea of getting help. And many men think, well, I don't really need help. I'm probably okay. I'm surviving. I'm managing. But the reality is, most males that I have spoken to are unaware of the impact of their abuse. So, one of the ways that you might, or here's a few ways that you could do sort of a self-test to ascertain whether or not it's a good idea for you to get professional help. So, one of the ways would be, are you avoiding deep conversations because you're afraid of where the conversation might go? If that's you, probably a good idea to get help. Are you afraid of getting close to people because you might accidentally disclose? Kind of the same thing. Do you find yourself unable to engage in intimate relationships? Like, are you blocked, kind of thing? Are you isolating or using substances to either numb out or feel alive? If that's you, get some help. Do you feel like talking about your abuse would make you cry? Crying's okay. It's actually really healthy. I encourage you, if you feel like you could cry, do it. Get it out. Are you a workaholic? Men become workaholics to distract from being abused, to distract from their thoughts. Do you engage in acts of hypermasculinity or like excessive sports, rock climbing, that kind of stuff? A lot of men do this just to prove their masculinity to themselves and other people. You don't have to do that. If you're born a man, you're still a man. You don't have to prove it. You're already a man. This is a big one. Are you engaging in acts of promiscuity to prove to yourself and others that you're a real man? For example, if you were abused by a male, you might want to just reaffirm to yourself over and over again that you do enjoy sexual relations with women. You don't need to do this. You don't need their validation continually to prove to yourself that you're a man. This is actually a really common reason for why men cheat. So if you're working with men, keep this in mind. Men, when you first get together with your wife, there's a lot of validation. There's a lot of, just attention and excitement around, the sexual relations and stuff. But it's really common that, I've heard that it can last for people, but it's really common that that sort of wild passion that you have in the beginning of a relationship kind of dies off. It matures into a different type of a relationship. Well, a lot of male survivors feel like maybe they still need that validation, they still need that type of attention, and if their wife has stopped giving it to them, then they will go elsewhere to get it. So unfortunately, are you confused still? Are you questioning if you were abused? If you are still questioning, listen to this again, see if there's a point in here that makes sense to you. Are you easily irritated, excessively angry, or subject to anxiety and depression? Anger is a really, really, really common reason that men present to therapy. So keep this in mind. Again, I have a lot of pastors watching or gonna watch the rerun, probably gonna watch the rerun. Nobody's watching with me now. Nobody's found me here today, so I'm just going on because we got to move on to this page. So I'm going to share it onto my Kelli Nicole Facebook page. But please, Dr. Kelli is my new Facebook site, so this is where I'm going to keep doing it. But yeah, back to this idea that anger is a really common reason why men present to therapy or men come to a pastor for help. They would just say, I'm so excessively angry. And sometimes they're not ready to talk about their abuse, or they don't recognize that it's because of their abuse that they're having such a problem. With anger, with this explosive anger, just extreme irritability. And if you think about it, men really just need to be validated. They need to have their hurts be validated. I know I get super angry if people don't notice me at times, right? Like if somebody just cuts me off in traffic, or if friends just overpower all the time and dominate the conversation. I feel like I'm not noticed. So you've got a boy who grows into a man and he's never been noticed. He's never been acknowledged or validated or supported properly for the abuse that he experienced. He's gonna be bottling up all that anger. If he can't express it outward, he turns it inward at himself, and this turns into depression. And I will talk a lot more about emotions and how they work in another podcast. But just know, pastors and teachers, counselors, if you're working with men, this is a really common reason that men present to therapy. They say, I'm just so angry, but they maybe even haven't made sense of what's going on for them because of their abuse, or that it's because of their abuse. They don't understand the full impact of their abuse. So this was the whole point of me writing this book, was to help people to understand help men understand what's going on for them, to help their partners make sense of what's going on for them. So please buy my book. It's called Men Too: Unspoken Truths About Male Sexual Abuse. It is available on Amazon. It's also available on audio. So it's just meant to support men. It's meant to support pastors, anybody who supports male survivors. So please, this book is my research, which was why boys and men are not disclosing sexual abuse. Even if you're not a male survivor, buy the book, listen to it, learn to recognize all the reasons that boys and men are staying silent, and be a better support to them. It'll really I promise you, it will change the way you look at boys and men. So again, this was a heavy topic. Thank you very much for watching the rerun. If you're triggered, practice self-care, spend some time in prayer, and again, I can help, but only He can heal. So thank you very much. God bless. Have a good day. Bye-bye.